Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you my favorite anti-king's Indian variation for white, the Semi-Averbakh. And if you don't know what the Semi-Averbakh is, it's the position you can see on the board. I have been playing it in tournament games for over 2 years now. I have a lot of experience in it. I did have some bad results, but not because of the opening, because of my middle game play and lack of tactical awareness. The Semi-Averbakh is the ultimate king's and anti-king's Indian, in my opinion. If you want to practice the Semi-Averbakh, the best way to do it would be to find a sparring partner and play it out against him. In the absence of a human willing to play chess against you all the time in every variation you choose, you can try to use Nocti. As you can see, I use it to import every single repertoire I make. And then what you can do, you can practice that repertoire against Nocti and have a human-like opponent who is going to play, moves in order to beat you, whether they are worse or better, and it's not going to play like an engine. So you can play the opening, select the difficulty of Nocti, select the time control, select the side, and practice the opening without learning about a bunch of lines blindly, but actually building a skill. If you want to do that, follow the link in the description in the comments, and if you decide to go premium on Nocti, use the code Hanging Pawns for a massive 64% discount. The complete PGN of everything you're going to see in the video, the Semi-Averbakh Anti-King's Indian, is available on my Patreon page. Again, you can find the link in the description below. You can also find more than 20 other repertoires, including E4, D4, Sicilian, Caro-Kann, French, Italian, London system, all of them. You can buy them separately, or you can decide to support the channel, join the Patreon for just $4 US a month, and gain access to all the repertoires, as well as 500 other posts. Why? There are two reasons. Firstly, black plays for an attack in the King's Indian. And the reason people play the King's Indian with black is because they want an attacking opening with a lot of dynamic play, where they are the ones going on the offensive. And the Semi-Averbakh switches things around completely. Oh, how the turntables. In the Semi-Averbakh, white's the one attacking. The reason we put our bishops on e3 and e2 is, well, there are several ideas behind it. Firstly, we want to control the g4 square. So the bishop on e2 controls g4, prevents knight g4, prevents bishop g4. Secondly, we want to push our pawns. And in the Semi-Averbakh, as you're going to see, it's most often the case that white just starts pushing the kingside pawns. So we're going to be the ones attacking. The second reason the Semi-Averbakh is a very, very good anti-King's Indian is because it directly plays against black's main idea, f5. And very often in the Semi-Averbakh, the bishop on g7 is going to be completely dead and buried on g7 or even on h8. So we're technically playing against black's worst piece, while not allowing black's main source of counterplay. Okay, the third reason the Semi-Averbakh is a great weapon against the King's Indian is because many people don't know it well. And many of my games prove that. Even very experienced players, even very strong players, titled players have messed up the Semi-Averbakh against me. Okay, we are going to be looking at 3 different moves for black against the Semi-Averbakh. The only 3 moves you have to know. There are 2 additional moves that transpose into the main line with e5, and those are knight a6 and a5. Because those 3 moves, it doesn't matter which move order black goes for. If they play the main line, they're going to play all 3 moves. Basically, they want the knight on c5, so after e5, d5, the knight has the c5 square and it can reach it via a6 or d7, and it needs the pawn to be on a5 in order to prevent b4. So we are not looking at knight a6 or a5, even though they are book moves, because they will transpose. So, after d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2. Now this move does not mean that we have to play the Semi-Averbakh. After castles, you could play the Averbakh with bishop g5, or you could transpose to the main lines of the King's Indian with knight f3. We do, however, keep the option to play bishop e3. Now let us begin with the main line. Black plays e5, white goes d5. We have given up the c5 square. And black's main source of counterplay is going to be knight a6, and knight c5. The e4 pawn is under pressure, and what black wants to do next is play a5, a4, a3, preventing us from comfortably castling queenside. Now let's go back to knight a6. Also knight d7 could have been played, it just transposes. White is going to go g4. That's the main idea behind the Semi-Averbakh. We want to play g4, preventing f5, misplacing that knight, maybe even playing g5, and on knight h5 we take it. But when we play g4, that means that castling kingside is usually, there are exceptions, very risky. And when there is a knight on a5, on c5, excuse me, so after knight c5, we have to defend the pawn, so f3. Let's say black goes a5. When there's a knight on c5, it's very hard to castle queenside without playing the move b3. In this video I'm going to focus on strategic and tactical ideas rather than on theory. Once again, you can find all the theory in the PGN below in the description and in the comments. So why would white want to play b3? This is the move I often play, and I actually often play it exactly here. It's not the best engine move, and I know that. I still have played it in tournament games or won games. Well, black would like to go a4, and then black would like to go a3. Let me just show you what happens if, white does nothing. Let's say we wait, a3, b3. Now if we ever castle queenside, knight b3 is very annoying. This is a tactical threat we have to be aware of. Knight b3, a b3, and our rook is not on a1. Then the pawn pushes forward to a2, and black's threatening the queen. We have to give up our knight, and we're completely losing. This is what black is trying to achieve. In conjunction with the bishop on g7, which could open up, it could open up in some cases, this is devastating. So this isn't something we would like to allow. So on a5, one of the most common ways to prevent this from happening is to play b3. The reason you don't want to play a3 is because now a4 shuts in any possibility of b4, gives up the b3 square, and the simple move like queen d2 loses an exchange. Now, having said that, we aren't going to go b3. I think it's more precise to ignore what black is doing. You could go b3, and then you have a slow game where you don't allow black's counterplay, but you're not playing the most precise moves. b3 is fine, but we're going to go h4 against a5. So, after f3, black has several options. Okay, they have to undermine the center somehow, and that can only be done with c6. f5 is obviously out of the question. a5 is a move, c6 is a move, and h5 is a move. They can start undermining the kingside, however absurd that may seem. We have played f3, shutting in our bishop and queen, so h5 doesn't actually lose material. Let's look at the sidelines first. h5 is by far the best move, and the only move that gives black a good game according to the engine. I have only faced it once. First of all, c6 is very risky. It's way too early to open up the center when we're playing h4. cd, cd, let's say bishop d7, h5. And what does black do here? If gh5, then we play g5. So gh5, g5, knight e8, rook h5, this is losing for black, and it's clear why. I mean, we're just breaking through on h6. And on h5, if they don't take, let's say they continue with a5, now we can go h6, and after bishop h8, we can play knight h3 and actually castle kingside. And the idea behind this is that there are no pieces that could attack our king. Not even sacrifices on g4 are possible, queen h4 isn't possible, nothing's possible, and our king is perfectly safe, and we're playing against the bishop. So this is how we play against c6. If black just plays a5, ignoring the h-pawn, we push on. Now, once again, they could play c6 and transpose to the position we just saw. They could also go bishop d7 and once again allow h5. All of those lines are in the PGN. But black's best move by far is a transposition to what I think is the best move, h5. Now, they could also play h5 straight away after f3, and that's what we should be looking at. So when black plays h5, we have a couple of options. We could go h3 or h4, and both moves are fine. But the most concrete line starts with g5. And after g5, black goes knight h7. They could also go knight d7 with the same idea. If they go knight d7, we can go b4 and knight h3 or even h4, but it's the same type of position. Knight h7 is more common because it puts pressure on g5. And after we go h4, defending our pawn, black plays f6. Now, I have played one game where my opponent did not play f6, and nothing went on for about 40 moves. And I didn't want to accept a draw, and I kept asking myself, well, what do I do if black doesn't play f6 or f5? The answer is nothing. There's nothing you can do unless you prepare b4. So if black manages to prevent b4 and doesn't play f6, then you're in trouble, because there's no way to open up the position, and you don't want to play f4 because that unleashes the bishop. That being said, if black wishes to have more than a draw, ideally a draw, because if they don't play f6 they could lose. If we achieve b4, they're going to play f6. And now we reach the only thematic position that's good for black. And after black plays e5 on move 6, this is the only way black should play according to the engine. It's possible to decline the trade. You could go knight h3, but the best move, I think, even though the engine favors knight h3 slightly, is gf6. Because now we get this very, very famous position where we can play bishop f2 defending the pawn, and black has this sacrifice, rook f4. And if you've seen my King's Indian repertoire video I posted a couple of days ago, this is what I recommend for black. Okay, bishop e7, preparing rook f4 and knight f6, queen d2, rook f4. Okay, eventually we'll have the option to grab that rook. That should not be done unless we have a perfect setup for that. And I'm going to explain what that means. So here we castle, giving up the h4 pawn. I think that's the best way to play. Bishop takes h4, bishop e3. Okay, now black should not move the rook away. If the rook moves away to, let's say, f7, then we can play knight h3 and follow that up with eventually rook dg1 and knight g5, and we have a huge advantage. So black should play bishop f6 or bishop e7. If they do, and they have taken the h-pawn, that's important, we can take the rook. The engine doesn't think it's the best move. In fact, b4 is the best move, followed by king b1 or knight h3. But playing bishop takes f4 leads to an equal position in which black's attack isn't scary at all, in my opinion. ef4, now you could go b4 and go crazy, but I like the idea of bishop f1. Why? Bishop f1 prepares two different things. Bishop h3, and exchanging the bishop on c8, which could become, an annoying piece on the queen side. And also we're preparing knight e2 followed by knight d4, blunting this bishop. And even though this is just equal according to the engine, we are up the exchange. And if black isn't careful, they are down material, so we could be winning. That being said, you don't have to take. You can choose to play knight h3, which is, according to the engine, better, or b4. Okay, so that's the main line, and that's what I faced in a vast majority of my games. In fact, I think only 2 of my tournament games were in the main line. No, 3. Okay, the next setup, same position, Semi-Averbakh. Black would choose to go into a Benoni with c5. Once again, we play d5, and black is going to go e6, transposing into a modern Benoni. When we play knight f3, they take on d5, we play cd5, and they have this, typical Benoni structure where they want to put pressure on e4, they want to go knight a6, c7, b5, or a6, b5. We want to play e5, but it's very hard to play e5. Also, we are allowing bishop g4, which is a dream exchange for black. So in my opinion, this is a worse version of the Benoni for white. I have a lot of experience now in the modern Benoni, and I actually won my last 2 games. I enjoy playing against it. But if I can avoid trading this c8 bishop for anything, I'm going to do that. So if it was white to play here, white should play h3. However, since it's black to play, bishop g4 is playable. Let me just show you one sideline which I faced once, which is annoying but easy to refute, b5. And against b5 here, if you take that, then e4 is hanging. It's as simple as that. If you play bishop b5, e4 is hanging again, because bishop b5, knight e4, knight e4, queen a5, when you go knight c3, bishop c3, and the pawn hangs. So on b5, we play e5. And if you learn e5, you will never have to worry about b5 again. So there are two lines, knight g4 and d5. d5 is definitely more common. Knight g4, there's bishop g5, queen b6, ed, b4, knight e4. Let me show you that. Knight g4, bishop g5, tempo on the queen moves away to b6, and now just ed6, and we have an advantage. After b4, we can go knight e4. Bishop b2 definitely loses to knight fd2. Bishop b2, knight fd2, the knight's attacked, knight c4 is hanging, and white wins. So the pawn is immune. And why are we up a pawn? It's not really clear. So after e5, most people are going to take, okay, which is the best move. And now bishop c5, tempo on the rook, rook e8, bishop b5, tempo on the rook, knight bd7, we have to save the bishop, so bishop a3, and now they go a6. After bishop c6, white has a slight edge according to the engine. White is up a pawn, black has a ton of play, and this is by no means a simple position because e4 is coming, but e4, knight d4, knight e5, and so on should be quite pleasant for us, especially if black doesn't know a bunch of lines. So, once we reach the Benoni, black shouldn't go b5 in my opinion, they should go bishop g4. And now, the one thing we're trying to avoid is exchanging this bishop for this knight. That would be a disaster. Why? Because we need to support e5, and we need this knight to either be on f3 or on c4, supporting e5 and putting pressure on d6. So we simply must decline the trade. So knight d2. Bishop takes, queen takes. And after rook e8, we have a problem. We have a problem because e4 is very weak, and the bishop on e3 is weak, and our king is weak. So once we castle, on knight a6, black wants to go knight c7 and b5. The best move is actually king h1, to avoid any tricks down this diagonal, here. It's just the safest move. And now after knight c7, we have to play a4, preventing b5. And black has this thematic sacrifice with knight takes e4. We could have gone f3 instead of king h1, but then the same type of thing works because the bishop is pinned to the queen and we don't have an f-pawn. So once they take on e4, f5, f4. So why does knight e4 work? Well, takes, f5, and you can see that both pieces are hanging. That being said, I still like this position for white. After f3, fe4, knight e4, this is fine for white. It's not a big advantage, but I think our king is actually safer, and I think it's easier for white to play. I should mention that if knight takes d5, queen c4 is completely winning, so the pawn is not hanging. Another thing that I have to mention is that after a4, if black plays a6, the same idea knight e4 does not work. Okay, because we have a5, and now if they take on e4, we take on e4, f5. In this position, we actually have the move knight takes d6, and we have knight c4. Why didn't we have that previously? Well, on knight e4 here, knight c4, f5. If we go knight d6, there's queen d6, and on knight c4, there's queen d5, and there is no knight b6. The pawn is still on a7. But when black plays a6, the same thing doesn't work. a5, knight e4, knight e4, f5, knight d6, and now if queen d6, knight c4, and there is no queen d5 because knight b6. That's a very important nuance you have to remember, not just in this position, but this is a pattern that's going to be recurring in these Benoni, King's Indian / Benoni type of positions. So that's c5. And finally, we have to have a look at knight c6, which is the most dangerous move of all for both sides. Of course, we play d5, and I have had 2 tournaments games go knight b8, which is just bad, of course. And a couple of days ago, I played a game against my teammate Daniel, who played the correct move, knight e5, and I lost the game, because I wasn't well prepared. So, knight e5 is a provocative move, and white of course goes f4. You don't have to go f4, you can go h3 to guard the g4 square, but f4 is the most precise. Knight eg4, we have to save the bishop, so bishop d2. Now, if black doesn't do anything, we just go h3, g4, g5, pick up the knight. So knight h6 is forced. In our game I played h3, which I still think is the best move, e6, and on e6 I played g4. g4 is fine, but slightly imprecise, because after g4, ed, cd, rook e8, you don't have g5, because e4 is hanging. So our game went g4, takes, takes, rook e8, g5, knight takes. Excuse me, knight takes. And eventually I got a better position, but I lost because it was really hard to play. So I sat down after the game, while I was also preparing this video, and I came up with the best setup for white, which is much safer. The reason I wasn't well prepared is because I hadn't expected knight c6, and because in my tournament games previously I would go h3. You know, I had prepped to go h3. I'd never played f4 before. Okay, so instead of g4, we take on e6 first. Okay, they play fe6. Now we go g4. And now it's not the same thing, because the f file is blocked, the e file is blocked, and there is no rook e8. So black has 2 options, knight f7 or b5. I don't understand either of them. Knight f7, I mean, I understand the point behind knight f7, because you don't want to lose a piece, but it's really not an active move. After knight f3, b5 now is the best move, or d5 or c6. If they go d5, we go e5. And I think this is great. I think this is just a great position, because eventually our pawns are going to start moving forward, and they do have a ton of counterplay with d4, but there's a forced line here that gives white a slight edge. So d4 takes on f6, takes on c3, takes on g7, takes on d2, queen d2, queen d2, king g7, rook hd1. And the weakness on e6 and the hole and the blockading square on e5 give white, in my opinion, a significant advantage. For example, bishop d7, king e3 or king c3, I don't know what's better, let's say king e3, bishop c6, knight d4. Very pleasant. I think this is a technical position that white could easily win. Okay, the best move, however, is not knight f7, it's a completely crazy move, b5. And you know, you can take that. Don't take with the knight, because knight e4 is hanging. But after this, bishop b7, the e4 pawn is attacked, queen c2, and d5 is the point. We are, however, up a pawn, and I honestly don't think many humans would be able to justify this pawn sacrifice. So how do we play this? We want to go castles queenside, and we want to go bishop c4. It's as simple as that. So we castle, they take, we go bishop c4, attacking the e6 pawn, knight d5 defending, knight g2, e3 perhaps is the best move, but so what? Of course we don't take, because on knight e3 our queen on c2 is hanging. But bishop e1, let's say c6, bc6, bishop c6, knight d5, ed5, bishop c3. This is nice. The pawns have been blockaded, they are extremely weak. The knight on h6 is offside. The engine says this is equal. White has a plus 0.5 advantage, so it's really nothing major. But I would take white here, because everything seems to be hanging in black's position. That being said, you could lose, because your king is relatively unsafe, but I don't know, once we trade the bishop on g7 eventually, and we blockade with knight d4, and we start putting pressure on the pawns on d5 and e3, one of them falls, black is going to collapse. So that's the Semi-Averbakh. As I said, 3 moves for black, knight c6, c5 and e5, and neither of those moves is really problematic for white. I have experimented with different setups, and I'm not going to be playing the Semi-Averbakh all the time. I'm going to switch to something completely different because it's very easy for my opponents to prepare, because there are many games in the database. But if you're looking for a great weapon against the King's Indian, try this out. I think you're not going to regret it. Again, if you want the PGN, or if you want to practice the Semi-Averbakh, follow the link in the description. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.